might have seen it already, but a few months ago we were out testing spods and spombs underwater. There was a lot of good feedback from that, but there was one question that we kept getting asked, and that was what happens to boilies. Obviously at the time we were using particles, but now we're going to do the same with boilies. We've got a mock float out in the swim behind us, we've felt around, found a nice clear spot, so we're going to try spods, we're going to try spombs, but we're also going to get thrown sticks out and just see what's going to be the most accurate, what kind of presentation they give and what you can do to improve your accuracy. So let's get to it and see what happens. With a spod, we're just filling it kind of 3/4 of the way full. You don't want to fill it right to the brim, otherwise you do lose a lot. From past experience, I'm expecting a few to just kind of come out on the cast, but hopefully it won't be too bad. Obviously compared to a normal spod mix, you can't compress it down quite as much, so let's see how this one goes. Got it, everything clipped up already, so it's just a case of getting the direction right. There we go. That's it. Obviously, as you can see, on a fairly short cast, a few did come out, but landed roughly around the same area, not quite as accurate as it could have been. So let's try another one of those. A few dropped on the initial cast, but they've got the same sort of power. Obviously, if you're spodding like 100, 120 yards, they're going to be falling a lot shorter, but on short casts like this, it's not a major problem. Moving on to spombs. One thing you do hear a lot of people questioning is actually how much you can get in there. So we're using the biggest one today that they do. That's the original one they brought out. And compared to a full payload of the spod, it's surprising that you can actually get all of that in and spend a little bit more time on it. You could probably get a few more boilies in there. I think they take about 60 or so. So spend a bit of time loading it up if you want to totally max it out. Make sure that door can shut, and you can actually get more than you can get in a spod.
As the spomb lands, it's clear to see just how quickly it works. As soon as the button touches the water, it's straight open and the boilies are dropped. You'll also notice it barely drops below the surface, where the spod was diving a good couple of feet under, although it does mean that it's a little bit louder on impact.
Pretty much as we were expecting there. Spomb obviously doesn't drop anything on the cast, which is the biggest point of it. It's landing and giving a nice spread of boilies. It's a little bit wider area than you're looking at with a spod, but to be honest, I prefer that nice gaps between the boilies, gets the fish moving around and picking up individual baits. The spod, it is dropping it really tight. Obviously there's that few that fall out that spread out a little bit, but there's a nice clump on the bottom. So I suppose if you're really fishing tight into like a little hole in the weed, couple of foot wide, that might be the one. But 99% of the time, if it's straight boilies, I'd definitely be going for the spomb. You're not losing anything on the cast, and it just gets it out there slightly better feeding situation, in my opinion. So that's it for spods and spombs. Now let's move on to the throwing stick. Throwing sticks, if you've not used one before, it is one of those things that take a little bit of practice, and ask anyone who's used one. The first few times you're going to end up with boilies straight in the edge and not going any distance, but once you get used to it, you can get really accurate, and the biggest thing is you can get them to go a long way. In the right hands, these can go in excess of 120 yards in some cases, so real long range baiting if you need it. The thing I'm looking at today is not so much accuracy, as that's really down to the angler, how close you can get them to land on the surface, but the way they work, they create backspin on the boilies, which keeps the boilie going through the air and gives it the trajectory to get it out there. The only downside to that is as it lands, it's already got a lot of spin on there, so it's going to affect it in the water. Is it going to spin out and miss a target totally? So I want to kind of get an idea of how far past your target you've got to be aiming, or before it even. So I've got a marker float out there, that's probably 60-70 yards, so we'll get a few baits out there, get it on the camera and just see how they're reacting under the water, and obviously how the spin's affecting it. So I've got a few baits here, let's give it a go. Obviously try and keep them fairly consistent, landing in the same sort of area. The thing you don't want to do is go too low, because obviously that is creating a lot of spin, it's going forward and just end up skimming, and it's really hard to keep them accurate. The only time you'd want to do that is if you're trying to get under overhangs or anything like that, but that's quite a rare scenario. So ideally you want it kind of going up 45 degrees and coming down fairly straight.
Well, that shows everything we need to know. Although there's a lot of spin on the bait, the water almost instantly takes out all the force and the boilie pretty much drops vertically. So with a thrown stick, make sure you're aiming for that marker float.